Well, happy Monday. Welcome into Ask Mike. Once again, Mike Irwin joining me to answer your questions. Mike, any questions about the Super Bowl by chance?
No.
No?
Not one.
What'd you think?
Look, it's obvious Kansas City had all their linemen hurt, and I couldn't believe people couldn't figure that out. That was the main issue in the game. They acted like it was nothing. I saw a lot of people didn't even mention it.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a problem.
Poor Mahomes running for his life
It was
all the
just
time.
Mahomes, having problems. Well, he had problems because he was running all for his life the entire game. So it's really a boring game.
Yeah,
I didn't
I wish it
watch
was
the
more
whole thing.
competitive. Yeah, it was hard. The only reason why I watched the whole thing is because, I had the square game. So I was just hoping that, my squares would pop up. And they didn't. So
I like both of those guys. I like Mahomes. I like Brady. So it didn't matter.
I have a lot of happy Tampa friends, though. That is for sure. All right, here we go. First question this week comes from Peak Hog, who says the original upgrade to the Tyson indoor facility included new mezzanine seating and expanding the east side of the building. They resurfaced the track and have called it complete. Did the expansion get pushed back, or is it really finished?
I think it's finished for the foreseeable future. Anybody that saw that original plan, it was really cool. I mean, you had these new steps sort of in that northeast corner of the building, right across from baseball, where you would come in and go up these steps, and then you'd be up kind of mezzanine seating, as he said. And it was really neat. It was going to add more seating. It was going to be better. You could see things better. But then they decided to do a lot of other things, and then COVID hit, and you got all these financial issues. I really think the improvement to the track program through if you look at what they call the football operations center, the baseball development center, the basketball operations center, all of those things. In those sports, they've all been improved. Well, in track, they hadn't. They still had these really ridiculous locker rooms underneath the stadium, the outdoor stadium, and you go in there and it's really bad. So they're almost, I don't know how close they are to finishing that, but the facility on the south end of the track is really nice. So now track is going to have locker rooms and all the stuff that goes with it. I'm not sure what all's in there, but it might be weight rooms and training facilities and whirlpools and all of that stuff. It'll all be there. And so they'll have a nice place for a locker room for the men and women, a lot better than they did have. This whole thing of making Tyson better, it's already a good facility. That would make it even better, but that might be 10 years down the road. I don't know.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Look, COVID hit, and they probably had to make some decisions.
Absolutely.
All right, Landy asks, what are you hearing on the NCAA basketball tournament for men and women? If played, are teams going to stay in a bubble, as mentioned before?
The men all along, or for a while, it's been announced they're going to Indianapolis for their bubble. The women are going to San Antonio. And it's the same arrangement, and the idea is the same. You put all those teams in one place, you can control the travel, supposedly keep COVID issues from popping up. And either one of those places, there's a lot of different arenas in the area. They're not strictly in Indianapolis or strictly in San Antonio, but there's other facilities nearby, like you could go up to Purdue and play a game. You could play a game at Butler, which is in Indianapolis. You could go down to IU, Indiana, which is close, or they've got obviously pro basketball arena there. So they'll be taken care of. Look, the women made out like a bandit. If you give me a choice of going to Indianapolis in March or April or going to San Antonio, give me a break. San Antonio is like going to Florida.
Yeah.
It's great. Weather's great. City's great. They got that written. I don't know. If
the Riverwalk is great.
I don't know if they'll let the players go to the Riverwalk.
Yeah.
But San
You
Antonio,
love the Alamo.
Yeah, like the San Antonio is a great place to visit. My grandparents were from Indiana. Indianapolis, we used to call it Indian no place. We did not like it. It's not a good place to go visit. So the men don't have it as well as the women.
And that's coming from a guy from Morton, Texas.
That's right.
But just saying.
I would take San
I think you're
Antonio over Indianapolis any day of the week.
All right, Swine America says, as a former Razorback Foundation member, I deeply resent that the New England Patriots have used my money to supplement their payroll when it comes to their employee of Brett Bielema. I know you are not a lawyer. Do you feel this is an argument that our foundation lawyers can or should make?
Well, they already made that argument, and they made it a long time ago, and here's what happened. we've mentioned this before, Bielema has this contract where he can make up to $150,000 a year, and that doesn't get taken away from what the U of A pays him. But a long time ago, the foundation decided that $150,000 a year to be an analyst for the Patriots was underpayment. So they stopped paying him completely, saying that he was trying to skirt his contract. And that has gone on for, I don't know, well over a year, probably like 2 years, to the point where he now says they owe him $7 million in back money. Now, they don't owe him anything beyond the point at which he got hired at Illinois, because his salary at Illinois is like $4 million a year, and it was 3.5 here. So he's making more there than he would ever make here, so they don't have to pay him anything from the date that he was hired at Illinois. And I don't know how much was left, but that's all out. But the $7 million is in question. Would I challenge that? Absolutely. If somebody came up to you and said, well, you owe this guy over here $50,000, but there may be a way to legally get out of it, would you want to try that? Well, like, are you kidding me? Of course. So I don't know how this is going to come out. It's supposedly going to be, I think the trial, it's a you know, a class action suit, or however you say that. I'm not a lawyer, as he pointed out. But it's a civil case, and I think it's going to be decided this summer, and we'll see how it comes out. But if the U of A saves some money, I think Razorback fans should like that.
Yeah. Hang 10 wants to know, what are you hearing on the Hill regarding the lingering financial effects of the pandemic? Clearly, there have been some retirements in staffing and such, but do you see any near-term lasting effects that the reduced revenue as a result of COVID? If so, what might they be?
I think SEC schools are in a lot better shape than other schools because of the TV revenue they got during this past academic year. So you still got a lot of money. I think it was like $40 million or something like that for each school. So they're in better shape. I think Arkansas is going to be okay as long as in the 21-22 academic year, which would basically start with football and all the stuff in the fall and go back to next spring. I think as long as they can have full stadiums and full crowds and figure out a way to get all that happening and the pandemic is over, I think they'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Here's what you have to worry about, to me, if you're Hunter Yurachek. I read a lot of Facebook stuff because I got a lot of fans on my Facebook, and I accept them as friends because I want to read what they have to say about Arkansas athletics. It gives me a chance to kind of test the waters at any given time about any subject. So I've been reading what a lot of fans have been saying about not going to football games, not going to basketball games. And what a lot of them are saying is, gee, I've been going to games all these years, I've been paying all this money, you got to pay a donation, then you got to pay for all these tickets. And they said, wow, didn't have to deal with parking, didn't have to deal with traffic jams, didn't have to deal with traffic jams after the game, and I was able to tailgate at my house with my friends. Wow, that was kind of cool. I don't know if I want to pay money, all this money I saved, I don't know if I want to go back and pay it again just to go through all that hassle. So I may not go to games. These are the people that Hunter Yurachek has to worry about. Once it's opened back up, and yes, you can get your season tickets, you can come. How many of them does he lose? What does it take to get them back? Mm-hmm. That could be a long-term effect, not just for Arkansas, but for any school. So for instance, next year, let's take a school like A&M that recently expanded their stadium to 103,000 or whatever. What if there's only 95,000? Alabama, 101, 102,000. What if the crowd's down in the 90,000 range? LSU, same thing. Well, they've made their stadiums bigger with the idea that more and more people are going to be coming in the future. What if it's less people? And what if that becomes a long-term trend? What if all of this happened with the pandemic, it convinced people they'd rather just watch stuff on TV? I mean, look at what we do. We had this way of doing this job that I was familiar with for 45 years. You took a camera, you went over to the athletic department, you went to games, you did all this stuff. And during the pandemic, we just walk over there to a computer and get on a computer and we got a Zoom. Mm-hmm. You don't take a camera anywhere. You save time, you save effort. I don't want to go back to that because I still want to see these coaches and players in person, but there was a benefit to that. So what's the long-term effect of all this? Sure. We don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely. It'll be interesting, 5 years down the road to look back at stuff like this.
Will you admit this was easier?
Oh my God. Well, being able to just sit down, work, and say, oh, I have an Eric Musselman Zoom, turn, put it on, listen to it, say, okay, great, turn around and keep working. I mean, that cuts
As opposed to getting in the vehicle,
driving all the way
down
there, setting
waiting
up.
for it to start.
Right.
These football interviews that we used to do after practice.
We would joke and sit there and time coaches, be like, up 15 minutes. Oh, he's usually 15 minutes, 20 minutes behind.
And then the players, you never knew. They sometimes would come in early, and if you didn't get there on time, you'd miss them.
Yeah.
But sometimes they wouldn't come in for an hour and a half.
Yeah, they'd shower
and you'd be
first.
going, I'm not going to get any dinner tonight because I'm sitting here waiting for this guy to show up.
Yep.
So all of that changed this year.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and we haven't been able to film really any games, and so we sit here and we watch the games and we ingest those, and so it definitely has completely changed our workflow.
In the press box, you can't yell.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm able to yell and say things that I couldn't do before.
You have been doing that. All right. Old Hog wants to know, this comment was in a recent Hogville article. Just a short time ago, the men's basketball team was being written off with rumors flying the players had quit on Eric Musselman. Truth or totally false rumors?
All I can confirm was that it was a rumor. And the way the rumor went, and there was some truth to this part, that I think it was during the Alabama game. It might have been during the LSU game and the Alabama game.
LSU game, I think, if
But
this is the story.
But you could see Eric Musselman in some of these timeouts, and he was not talking to the players. He was like standing off to the side, and he had other coaches doing that. So the rumor was when they got back to Fayetteville and had their first practice after this game, that the players said, no, we don't want you coaching us. If you don't want to coach us in a game, we're not going to let you coach us in practice. Now, did that really happen? It sounds weird to me. I don't know. If it was really true, and I'm not saying it is, but if it was actually true, it got resolved a long time ago because this team has now won 4 SEC games in a row. The last time I checked, they were a half game out of second place, and they're in really good shape right now. And they've apparently resolved all of these issues that they had. Arkansas had a top-loaded SEC schedule, played all these tough games right off the bat, and now they're benefiting from that. And they're also playing a lot better. A lot of guys that weren't playing well earlier are playing better now. Their half-court offense is working a lot better. They're rebounding better. They're playing better defense. Now, look, that could change at any given time. We don't know. But right now, this basketball program looks like it's looks like it's in good shape. And if they had any problems after those 2 games, they don't have those problems
And
now.
I think it's important to point out, like, a team is like a family. You're going to have disagreements sometimes with your mom and dad, with your siblings. And, yeah, obviously at that LSU and at that Alabama game, like, probably tensions were high. So people are probably going to fight and butt heads a little bit, but that doesn't mean you don't regroup, and obviously it's worked out. And then you also have to remember, again, they're going through that losing streak, and no one likes to lose. And so, are there going to be tension? There's probably some tension moments in every locker room across the country.
The only difference is in the old days, and I'm talking about ancient prehistoric times, when I played
when
high
you were
school,
like 10.
when I played high school ball, you never said squat to a coach. The only thing you ever did was answer a question. And if you ever even thought about saying something negative, you might as well just be planning that you weren't on the team anymore, because they were not going to let you say anything like what supposedly happened here. And again, I don't know that really happened. I'm not going to say it happened unless I was there in that practice facility and observed it, and I didn't, so I'm not going to say it happened.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's resolved, like you said.
Yeah, it's not a thing anymore.
Not an issue. All right, Arkansas Redneck says, how much will Arkansas pay A-State for the 2025 football game? And if A-State wanted the game so bad, why is Arkansas paying?
All we can do is go by what Hunter Yurachek said last week. And he said, first of all, the financial details haven't been worked out. Well, the game's 4 years away, 4.5 years. So it's no surprise they haven't come up with any numbers yet. What he said was he anticipated the payout to Arkansas State to be something similar to what would be paid, what Arkansas in the past has paid to other Sun Belt teams. And the same thing with the tickets arrangement. How many tickets do they get? Well, it'll be similar to what we've done before. I don't think that's going to end up being the case, and here's why. this game will be a sellout, I promise you. And those games weren't. So Arkansas is going to make more money off this game. I think they're going to end up having to give more money to Arkansas State, and I think they're going to have to give them more tickets. Now, they're still not, it's not going to be a 50-50 split. They might get 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 tickets or whatever. Now, why, if ASU wanted this game so badly, do you just say, well, if you wanted to play it, just we give you no money? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's
Nobody
not how that
does
works.
that. All schools, they don't play football without making money off a game. If they did, it would be like COVID all the time. You'd go broke. So they would have never agreed or won't agree to play Arkansas if you don't pay them. And probably they're going to need a good payout. This game, though, and I want to make this distinction, this game didn't happen because ASU said, we want to play, we want to play. That's not why this game happened, finally. It happened because the athletic department, and Sam Pittman in particular, looked at the schedule and went, I'm not going to build a football program if I got to play SEC games down in Little Rock. It hurts my recruiting. I can't do that. You have to figure out a way, Hunter Yurachek, to get us out of that SEC game every other year in Little Rock, and that would be with Missouri. So Hunter Yurachek went to the Stadium Commission, the people that work for the Stadium Commission, and said, okay, we want to get that Missouri game out of Little Rock. What do we have to do to make that happen? And I'm not there, but I can just assume that the people they were talking to said, give us ASU. That would be a sellout because they have to make money too, or they can't continue to operate that facility. If you have a full stadium, they're making money off of parking, they're making money off of sales in the concession stand and all that. So if you have a full stadium, you're going to make more money off that, and that's what they want. And that's not going to be the same as if you let UAPB play all the time. Yeah. So they came up with a compromise where, okay, we're going to play UAPB, we're going to play this other team, then we're going to play UAPB again, and then we'll play Arkansas State. And that's where it stands right now.
Yep. All right, Sal Manila says, what does the U of A give playing any games at War Memorial Stadium? Or why doesn't the U of A just give up playing any games in War Memorial Stadium? The times have changed and Razorback Athletics has to accept it. Ole Miss and Jackson and Alabama and Birmingham have gone away. Why do we cling to the past?
Well, I think the Florida-Georgia still plays an off-campus game. I don't know if there's some others out there somewhere, but it's not just totally unheard of. Why do they keep doing it? And I really thought maybe it would go away. So why do they keep doing it? Well, it's real simple. Hunter Yurachek, Frank Broyles, John Barnhill, they all understood that if you're going to want a statewide program, you're going to have a statewide program, you got to have a presence in the most populated part of the state. You can't just blow it off. And they've done that forever in football, and they've started doing it in the last 20 years or so in basketball and baseball, and it helps. You go down there and play a game a year in basketball, game a year in baseball. So why the difference with football? Because the basketball arena and the baseball stadium are SEC standard. You know, the basketball arena maybe is not the best I've seen, but it's not.
Fill it.
They fill it, and it's not small. So it's clearly an SEC standard basketball arena. War Memorial is not. The only stadium that probably it's better than is the one at Vanderbilt. And I've said for years, Vanderbilt ought to just boot them out. They don't belong in the SEC, and they don't care. They're not going to, worry about their stadium. But War Memorial is not an SEC quality stadium. Now they've done some things to upgrade it. They replaced the turf. They improved the locker rooms. They improved the communication, like if you're the opposing team and you got headsets on, now you can actually hear what they're saying up in the booth. I still haven't done anything about the scoreboard, which is terrible, but there's only so much they can spend on that place. Now here's the long-term issue. I think they're going to continue to play it for a while there, and I think they know they need to. But here's the issue. The further we get into this thing, the more difficult it is going to be to make the improvements that you need to make to keep that stadium where it needs to be. Nothing stays static. Stuff is going to break, stuff is going to need to be replaced. You got to do maintenance on a stadium that big. And if you really wanted to secure the game forever, you'd have to expand it to like 70 or 80,000. Well, the only way to do that is if Arkansas said to Little Rock, okay, we'll play 3 games a year here, we'll play 3 games a year there, blah, 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 or 4 and 3 or whatever you're going to do. And they're not going to do that. They already don't want to play the games that they played there. They're sure not going to give them more. So long term, I don't know where the future of this is. And it's only because of the stadium. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else. We see they want to play the baseball game. We see they want to play the basketball game there. It's just War Memorial is a problem that can't be solved. Yeah. I don't know any answer to it. Some rich guy could step up and say, I'm going to pay $150 million because I'm going to die and I'm a billionaire and I don't have anywhere else to give my money. So here's War Memorial, $150 million, expand to 80,000. I mean, that would solve the problem. There's not been anybody out there that said that.
Maybe David Basil will do it.
I don't think he has that much money. Not sure, but I don't think so.
Just, always, hey, David Basil, why not? Okay. All right, CowHog32 wants to know, will there be teams on standby for the NCAA tournament in case a team has to drop out due to COVID? Obviously, this would be just for the first round.
That's a really, really good question. And as far as I know, it has not been addressed. Or my guess is the NCAA does have a plan for that. They have not, to my knowledge, have not made it public. But it's a pretty simple thing to me. If it were to come up and you could only do it for the first round, I would assume they would just go back to the Selection Sunday show and the first team out, whatever that first team was, and they always show that team would suddenly be in. But here's the way they're probably going to avoid that. My guess is teams that know they're going to the NCAA tournament, maybe the week before the tournament, they're going to start testing their guys and keeping them kind of in a bubble and making sure they don't do things that would cause them to have a problem. Teams that just get in on Selection Sunday will start that day. Once you get to, if you're the women, San Antonio, but once you get to Indianapolis for the men, my guess is they're going to test you when you get there, and then you're in a bubble. So the odds of this happening are greatly reduced. Plus, we're talking 2 months down the road. Where will the vaccination thing be by then? My guess is athletes will have already been vaccinated by then. At least these basketball players will have been. And so I just don't see this as an issue. I don't think it's going to come up because if you started having COVID during the tournament, yes, you would have big time problems.
Yep. Pork Soda asks, do we know why Julius Coates entered the transfer portal a month after announcing he was returning? Does it have to do with the change in D-line coach? Can you shed some light on that situation?
Yeah, I got to be real careful here because I don't like talking about athletes in terms of rumors. They're people. We don't like to say you did this or you did that. The rumors were that he'd had some issues. The coaches had sat him down. We know he didn't play for a while. And they'd worked through some things, and maybe what happened after that was they thought he was okay, and then they decided, no, he's not. And they encouraged him to leave. The other side of that is he may have, and this is a thing Andy Hawkins, who covers the Razorback, addressed in a thing he wrote. I think it's called Hit That Line or something.
Yeah, Andy Hodges.
And he wrote a thing which I found was really interesting. I think it was last week. And it was in connection with Sam Pittman and why he waited so long to announce these staff changes. But the article really wasn't about that. It was about the portal and what the portal is doing to coaches. It is so easy to transfer right now that Hodges basically was saying that coaches are paranoid about anything because in the old days, as a coach, you could say this, we're changing the policy on this, we're doing this with that, we're making these changes with the team. And if you didn't like it as a player, you had to decide, do I want to go through the whole transfer hassle and sit out a year and do all this stuff? Just too complicated. So even if players were mad about something, they generally put up with it and stayed where they were. Nowadays, if you don't like something, you just jump. You're in the portal. And it's happening everywhere. And his contention is that coaches have gotten paranoid over it. So they don't tell us things. Like with Pittman, he admitted that he didn't tell us anything about these staff changes. He just let it remain rumors until he had everybody in place that was a replacement, so that if a player freaked out about it, they were able to say, okay, go talk to this guy. He's your new coach. He likes you. You like him. And everything's fine. So this is the whole thing about this, is this portal thing is just, to me, long term, it's an issue because they've made it too easy to transfer. I don't know if it'll ever get resolved. And then you get into this whole idea of what's going to happen when this likeness thing comes, this paying for your likeness thing comes into play. Look at the problem that's going to create. Because if I'm a quarterback, and especially, let's say I'm a 5-star quarterback, and I decided to go to Alabama, and everybody's talking about me. And so I start as a freshman, I play for 3 years, and then I'm going to the NFL. I'm going to get a lot of money off the NCAA football game. I'm going to sell merchandise with my name on it. I'm going to make a lot of money while I'm in college. Now, they may defer these payments, but I still get this money when I get out. What happens to your offensive line guys? These are the guys blocking for you and making you win games. And you look good, and they're these big guys. They show them every once in a while, but they're nobody, and they don't get any money. Do they start getting mad at you because you got all the money and they don't?
You're opening up a whole can of worms that we could talk hours about. Well,
so how does that affect coaches?
Yeah.
That's my point. How do coaches deal with this? It's the same thing as the portal. Coaches today are having to deal with issues that they did not have to deal with in the past.
Well, again, we don't have to open up too much, but we talked last week about Will Wade and possibly being a part of that wiretap and the whole like middleman people with fraud and the FBI. Like, first thing that pops into my head, right? Like you're a big business, and I'm just using this as an example, and I'm not saying that they would do this, but you're Walmart, and obviously you have a lot of ties to this area, and there's a high 5-star recruit, and you're like, hey, we'll pay you to be in our commercials. Technically, he can do that because he can get paid for his likeness, but you got to come to Arkansas.
Yeah, I don't know.
How does that, like, what do you have to draw the line once they come, like after they commit?
My guess is they're going to say you can't give them this money while they're a recruit.
Yeah.
You can only, but still you could say, hey, we'll give you this when you get here.
Right. I don't know. I mean, again, there's so many. Maybe we'll just have an Ask Mike that concerns that, because there's so many
Anyway, back to Coates. We don't really know for sure. I'm not comfortable enough to say why he left, but I'm pretty sure it didn't have anything to do with his D-line coach.
Yeah.
There could be any number of reasons why he's gone, but he is gone.
Yeah. All right, Old Fart wants to know, is the A-State game a one-off at this time, or is it scheduled to be reoccurring yearly?
I'm guessing, well, right now it is a one-time thing because that's all that's been announced. I think I said this during some of our coverage of that last week. To me, once you do it, you've let the genie out of the bottle. I don't know how you play them and then go, okay, it was nice, we played them, we made War Memorial people happy, we're not playing them anymore. I just don't think that works. So I don't know if it's going to end up being an arrangement where you take those 3 teams, well, one of them's not involved right now, but let's say you took UCA, UAPB, and Arkansas State, and you rotated them every 3 years. So you would end up playing Arkansas State every 3. I don't think they will play Arkansas State every year.
Yeah.
But I could see a thing where it rotates in Little Rock, and it's one of those 3 teams every year. And I just don't think there's any way to avoid something like that.
Yeah.
They've agreed to do it. Now it's going to happen.
Look, if Arkansas wins that first game, Arkansas could be like, okay, that was fun. We did it. We made everyone happy.
They could.
If you lose that game and you're Arkansas, you're calling them saying, let's play next week. I mean, you can't lose that game and then say, okay, we're never going to play that game again.
Yeah.
All right. VB Mark wants to know, will the postponement of the A&M game help or hurt the Must Bus?
You know, I could answer that question with total accuracy tomorrow night, right?
Right.
Because then we'll know when the Kentucky game's over.
Hold that thought. We'll get back to you.
But let's go back to what happened here when the postpone was announced. And you may have remembered this differently than I did. But I remember Musselman at the time saying things like, well, I really regret that A&M has this COVID issue. We don't wish this on anybody, but it might actually help us because we've got all these injuries, and this may give us time to heal back up, so it might actually end up helping us. He said that first. And then when they had this practice, and I think it was Friday he had a Zoom, and now he totally changed his tune. He was saying things like, well, a lot of these guys are okay. I think now he's starting to worry about the layoff because they last played on Tuesday. And so now if you take A&M out of the mix, they go a whole week without playing a game. And he was saying, look, this isn't like football. We're not used to going a whole week without playing a basketball game, and I'm worried about that. So he kind of changed his mind on what was the biggest issue. I'm not worried about any of that stuff myself. If I were him, what I would be worried about is Kentucky's unpredictable nature this year. The big picture, they have the worst overall record in the SEC, but they have played better in SEC games. And they've actually won a couple of games. I think they beat LSU, and I think they beat Florida. Those are good teams. So on those nights, they played really well. Other nights, they've looked really bad. But also, most of the games they've lost to Alabama twice. That's no disgrace. They lost to Missouri. Missouri's really good.
They lost to Tennessee.
And they lost to Tennessee. And those are the top 3 teams in the standings right now. So you can sort of explain Kentucky's problems in light of that. And what you can also say is whether or not Arkansas wins this game tomorrow night will have a lot to do with how Kentucky plays. If they come out and play like they're capable of playing at times, this will be a really tough game. If they come out and play like they have in some games, Arkansas will win easily. So I'm just not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. But it's definitely evolved. I think Eric Musselman at first was like, the first thing in his mind was, I can get guys healthy. This might not be a bad thing. And then he said on Saturday, it's been really hard to motivate guys to practice hard all this time. Now I'm worried that we won't be ready. But you've seen other teams who have come back from much longer stretches of layoffs because of COVID and actually come back better than they were. And I'm talking like 16, 13-day layoffs. And they've come back a better team than they went when they went on break.
That's been one of the COVID things that I've been amazed by. We've had these teams that have all these layoffs. I can't remember the women's team. It might have been Tennessee. They had this long layoff, and then all of a sudden they came back and they were playing great. And everybody thought they would be rusty.
Exactly. All right, last question. Supposedly Frank Burrows' rationale for not playing in-state schools was to avoid splitting fan base. Fans would have to choose sides, but I keep seeing reports now that it was about fear of losing to the other schools. What's your take on it?
Well, first of all, here we're dealing with a little bit different issue with this question because he's just saying in-state schools. He's not saying Arkansas State. Here's what I think Frank would have said about in-state schools, because now you're talking about basketball, for instance, and playing Arkansas Little Rock. I think his feeling was that if you played schools like UAPB, Arkansas Little Rock, UCA, those schools had fans that were also Razorback fans. But if you started playing them and beating them, they wouldn't be Razorback fans anymore. And his attitude was, why would I do that? Now with Arkansas State, it was a little bit different. I mean, I think he fully understood that their fans are not our fans. But he still felt like that with Arkansas State, what do you gain if you beat them? People just think, well, you were supposed to beat them. What if you gain if you lose? Now you look really bad. But he said even if you beat them, he said this to me one time, even if you beat them several years in a row, what happens? He said, fans love the underdog. All of a sudden, we win several games, they become the underdog, and we're the bad guys. And we lose some of our own fans. They might be casual fans, not hardcore Hog fans, but they ain't our fans anymore because they like Arkansas State because we're the bad guys. I mean, he would think of all these things, and you would have to go, I guess you're right.
Yeah,
so,
why are you beating up on the little brother for so much?
Yeah, so there's... I go back to what I keep saying about this. I don't have an opinion on any of this stuff because to me, you don't know anything until they play. You can have a million theories, but until they play, and really they need to play several times to come to any conclusion. So would playing Arkansas State hurt Arkansas? I don't know. Would playing you in basketball, if you start playing Arkansas Little Rock in basketball, they've already done it. Has it hurt? Have they lost any fans because of it? I don't know. Just remains to be seen. UCA is that big question mark out there because they haven't played them in anything. And especially in football, they're a factor. I mean, so once you start playing them, and I assume they will eventually, what will that do?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. You know, like I married a Fayetteville native who went to Arkansas State on a golf scholarship. He's from Fayetteville. We live here. He's a Hog fan. But I go home on Wednesday and ask him at dinner, hey, who would you root for? He goes, Arkansas State, absolutely.
Yeah, so in that game,
you know,
Arkansas would lose a fan.
They would. I asked my son who he would root for, and he said Alabama, but that's a whole nother story for another time.
He's crazy.
He's
right
done
now.
crazy. We watched one game with Alabama, Oklahoma, and now all the answers are Alabama. And we got to fix that. All right. That is going to do it for Ask Mike. Remember, if you have a question for Mike that you want him to answer, just head on over to honkville.net. Go to the Ask Mike forum and ask there. You can ask anything. Nothing is off limits for the most part. All right.
Something.
It depends. It depends. Keep it clean. All right. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you next week.